It's the sixth night of Hanukkah, and Latkes Lo Mein were on the menu tonight until this snowmageddon canceled our Shabbat dinner plans. In the US and Canada, it has become Jewish tradition to eat Chinese food on Christmas. And while Christmas is still a few days away, we wanted to indulge tonight when we could be together. Why Chinese food? Truth be told, the tradition dates back to at least 1935, when there's a mention in the New York Times of a Chinese restaurant owner bringing chow mein to a New Jersey children's home, Jewish children's home, on Christmas Day. And since neither people observed Christmas, it was a natural connection between them. Immigration patterns were also a possible link, with large waves of Jewish and Chinese immigrants coming to North America during the 19th and 20th centuries and settling in proximity to each other. Historian and food writer Lara Rabinovich commented, "It's not a new trend of Jewish immigrants and later their children and their children's children who've been eating at Chinese restaurants on Christmas Day." It's fascinating how these kinds of traditions come about. It reminds me of the story of a young woman who asked her mother why she always cuts off the end of the brisket before cooking it. "It's the best part. Why would you just throw it away?" Her mom answered simply, "Because that's the way my mother always made it." The next week, they go to Bubby's house and watch her prepare her famous brisket recipe and see her cutting off the ends of the meat as always. "Why do you do that?" the young woman asked her Bubby. "Because," her Bubby answered, "that's the only way the meat will fit into the pan." We do things for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes our rationale goes back to biblical or Talmudic times. Other times just back a generation or two. And as we are in the middle of Chanukah, consider your family traditions. What rituals do you do, and where do they come from? Locally, the matching pajama family picture seems to be a really big deal. I recently heard about a wild family dance party after the candle lighting. In our family, we always lit candles, sang Hanukkah songs, and probably like your families, gave small gifts to each other, one for each night, like socks and chocolates or books. Hanukkah is such a minor holiday in our calendar, and so the presents weren't the important part. And let's be honest, who really considers socks a gift anyway? And in addition to these little gifts, each year we would have bought one big present for the family, like the time we bought our ping pong table or an Xbox, all of which have provided years of entertainment for us. This year, I told my kids, no presents. I wasn't being mean, but they've already received some wonderful things this year, and it just didn't feel necessary. Of course, we've been lighting candles and singing Hanukkah songs and even playing dreidel, but I must admit, it feels like something is missing. And isn't the point of giving a gift giving something that's not necessary? Don't tell them. Really, don't tell them. It's a secret. I broke down and I bought them each a special gift for the last night of Hanukkah, and it's not socks. And frankly, I feel a lot better. Most of us know the standard story of Hanukkah, how in 165 BCE, a great miracle happened. The Greeks, who were in power, outlawed Judaism, and the Maccabees, a small band of Jews led by Judah Maccabee, staged a rebellion against them and won. That in itself was a miracle. But when they went back to rededicate the temple, they found only enough oil to light the menorah for one day, and miraculously it lasted for 8. Now, there's another story that we tell that isn't so well known, the story of Judith. According to the Jewish Women's Archive, Jews often told her story in rabbinic times in celebration of Chanukah. It is set a few hundred years before the Chanukah story, when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Babylonian Empire, ruled. He sent his general Holofernes to conquer the land of Judea, and he camped outside of the town of Bethulia, blocking off water, food, and other supplies to the city. The situation was becoming dire, and it was then that Judith devised a plan. As the story goes, under the cover of night, Judith and her handmaid snuck out of Bethulia and into Holofernes' camp, pretending to surrender. The general was smitten by her, took her into his tent, where she fed him salty cheese and wine, lots and lots of wine. Holofernes fell into a deep sleep, and when he was finally out cold, Judith took his sword and chopped off his head. Really. It threw the Greek army into disarray, giving time for the Jews to attack and win the war. No doubt, it's a gruesome story, and it's obvious why we don't tell it to our youngest children. But from Judith, we learn about themes such as women's empowerment, courage, strength of community, peoplehood, identity, and so much more. I like Judith. Fun fact, Judah, as in Judah Maccabee, and Judith, basically the same name. They both mean Jews. Another fun fact, early rabbinic texts document the practice of eating dairy on Chanukah to commemorate the salty cheese that she fed to Holofernes. It's even likely that the first latkes weren't made from potatoes, but were made from fried cheese pancakes that were popular in the Middle Ages. It does make you wonder, why don't we tell her story? And what other stories don't we know? Well, here's one. I'm in the middle of reading Dara Horn's book, People Love Dead Jews. It's a good read so far, and I highly recommend it. Chapter 2, Frozen Jews, introduced me to the Jewish story of Harbin, China. Located in far northeastern China, an area that boasts an average temperature of negative 35 degrees Celsius year-round, a lot colder than it is here tonight, it is most famous for the Harbin Ice Festival, which despite the bitter cold attracts 2 million visitors a year. And believe it or not, the city of Harbin, population 16 million, was built by Jews. It centered around the building of the Trans-Siberian Railroad, first luring Jews to this frozen tundra in 1898 with the promise of freedom of religion and the ability to live without anti-Semitic restrictions. At first, hundreds of Jews, then thousands, came as refugees from the Russian pogroms and subsequent wars. At its height, 20,000 Jews lived in Harbin. It was a modern and thriving city, with Jews building the first hotels, banks, pharmacies, insurance companies, department stores, publishing houses, and more. There were 2 synagogues, the old and the new, a kosher butcher, a mikveh, a matzah bakery, plus schools and hospitals and soup kitchens, a Hebrew free loan, an old age home, theaters, orchestras, Zionist clubs. It sounds like an incredible place, literally a dream come true. And as Dara Horn puts it, Harbin was great for the Jews until it wasn't. Refugees from the Russian Revolution included many virulent anti-Semites whose hatred quickly became institutionalized into the local government. They burned the old synagogue in 1931. At the same time, the Japanese occupied Manchuria with thugs targeting Jewish businesses and their families for extortion, including kidnapping and murder. Please go read chapter 2. Please go read chapter 2 of the book for the whole story. The last Jewish family left in 1962, leaving just one woman, Hannah Agri, who refused to leave and served as the caretaker of the synagogue until she died in 1985. And today, one Jew actually lives there, an Israeli named Dan Ben-Canaan, who has taken on the responsibility of Harbin's Jewish history, supported by the government, who quickly discovered the value of Jewish heritage sites and has invested $30 million into its restoration and preservation. I had never heard about Harbin, let alone its Jewish past, and I am so glad to know its story. I wish that it had had a happy ending like the cruise of oil that lasted a miraculous 8 days, or a powerful heroine like Judith, who we can look to for strength. But in accordance with Jewish practice, as we indulge in our Chinese food and light the Hanukkah lights, we will remember Harbin and the Jewish community who lived and thrived there. These candles that we light tonight now become the lights of memory, remembering the times long gone as we continue to shine on. And perhaps that is the miracle after all. Shabbat Shalom.